a glittering penthouse overlooking Central Park, a self-made millionaire husband, Justin Croft, who seemed to worship the ground she walked on. For Anna, life was a fairy tale, but fairy tales can become nightmares in the blink of an eye. What happens when the man who promised you forever throws you pregnant and terrified out into the pouring rain with nothing but the clothes on your back? He thought she was a nobody. He thought she was weak. He's about to learn that her quiet, unassuming father, a man he'd never even bothered to properly meet, was about to make a single phone call. A call that would unravel his entire million-dollar empire thread by thread, until nothing was left but dust. This is the story of how one man's cruelty awakened a sleeping giant. Anna Croft traced the delicate frost patterns on the floor-to-ceiling window of her Manhattan penthouse. Below, the city lights of the Upper East Side twinkled like a carpet of fallen stars. It was a view that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, a view she had grown accustomed to, but never truly comfortable with. In her hand, she clutched a small, velvet-lined box. Inside lay a pair of Heine hand-knitted baby booties, white soft and impossibly small. A secret joy she had been holding close to her heart for 6 weeks. Her husband, Justin Croft, was a force of nature. He hadn't been born into this world of obscene wealth. He had conquered it. The son of a dock worker from Queens, he had clawed his way up with sheer grit intellect and a ruthlessness that he reserved for the boardroom. His company, Croft Innovations, was the darling of the tech world, specializing in predictive market algorithms. To the world, he was a genius, a visionary. To Anna, he was the charming, ambitious man who had swept her off her feet at a gallery opening 2 years ago. He had seen her a quiet art history graduate and pursued her with the same single-minded focus he applied to his business acquisitions. Their life was a whirlwind of charity galas, exclusive dinners, and weekend trips to the Hamptons on his private helicopter. Justin loved to show her off. "This is my Anna," he'd say, his hand possessively on the small of her back. "My quiet place in a loud world." But the cage, no matter how gilded, was still a cage. Justin curated her life. He chose her clothes, subtly steering her away from her bohemian artistic style towards sleek designer labels that better reflected his brand. He vetted her friends, dismissing her old college companions as unambitious and lacking vision. Slowly her world had shrunk until it contained only him. She had mistaken his control for care, his possessiveness for passion. Tonight was the annual Croft Innovations Gala. Justin was set to receive a major award, the Titan of Technology trophy. Anna knew how much it meant to him. It was validation, a golden seal of approval from the old money establishment he so desperately wanted to be a part of. She had planned this evening perfectly. After his speech, when they were alone, basking in the glow of his victory, she would tell him. She would open the little box and watch his brilliant, intense eyes light up with a new kind of joy. The joy of becoming a father. "Are you ready, darling?" Justin's voice, smooth as single malt scotch, cut through her thoughts. He emerged from their dressing room, a vision in a custom Tom Ford tuxedo. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp, and his eyes held the predatory gleam of a man who always got what he wanted. "Almost." She smiled, hiding the box behind her back. She wore a deep emerald silk gown he had picked out. It was beautiful, but it felt like a costume. He walked over his gaze, sweeping over her, not with the warmth of a husband, but with the critical eye of a director assessing his leading lady. "Good. The car is waiting. Remember, tonight, Anna, cameras will be everywhere. Smile, look adoringly at it. and let me do the talking. We need to project power and unity, especially with the new funding round on the horizon." The "we" stung. He didn't mean we the couple. He meant we the brand. As she slipped the box into her small clutch, a flicker of doubt, cold and sharp, pierced through her excitement. She had told herself his recent distance was just stress about the gala, about the pressures of his work. He was always working, always strategizing. But lately the distance has felt different. Colder. He would take calls in his study with the door closed, his voice low and clipped. He'd started staying out later, coming home smelling of a perfume that wasn't hers. When she'd asked, he'd dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "Networking, darling, it's a dirty business." She pushed the doubt away. A baby would change everything. A baby would ground him, remind him of what was truly important. It would turn their carefully constructed house into a real home. It had to. At the gala, the flashbulbs were blinding. Justin was in his element, a king holding court. He accepted the award with a speech that was both charming and arrogant, thanking his brilliant team, and with a brief, practiced smile in her direction. "My beautiful wife, my anchor." The applause was deafening. Anna smiled until her cheeks ached, playing her part to perfection. Later, as they were leaving, a woman stepped out of the shadows to congratulate him. She was stunning, in a blood-red dress, her name, Isabella Rossi. Anna recognized her as the daughter of a rival tech CEO. She moved with the sleek confidence of a panther, her eyes fixed on Justin with an unnerving intensity. "An incredible speech, Justin," Isabella purred, ignoring Anna completely. "You're shaking up this city. My father is impressed." "Isabella," Justin said, his voice a shade warmer than it had been with Anna all night. "Your father is a dinosaur. I'm the meteor." Isabella laughed, a low, throaty sound. She touched his arm, her red nails a stark contrast against his white cuff. "A meteor is just what this town needs. We should talk. Soon." The exchange was over in seconds, but it left a chill in the air. In the car on the way home, the silence was heavy. Justin was scrolling through his phone, a small, self-satisfied smile on his face. The moment was gone. The perfect, triumphant mood she had waited for had evaporated. Her secret felt heavy in her purse. "Did you have a good evening?" she asked, her voice small. "It was a triumph," he said, not looking up from his phone. "The press will be ecstatic. Our stock will soar on Monday." He didn't ask if she had a good evening. She looked out the window at the blurred city lights, the tiny hand-knitted booties in her clutch, suddenly feeling like a foolish, childish dream. The gilded cage had never felt so cold. The weeks following the gala were a slow, agonizing descent into a new reality. The warmth that had once existed between Anna and Justin, however faint, was now gone, replaced by a polite, sterile coldness. He was a phantom in their penthouse, leaving before she woke, returning long after she had retreated to their silent bedroom. The excuses were always the same late-night meetings, investor dinners, coding sessions that couldn't be interrupted. The scent of Isabella Rossi's perfume, a cloying, expensive mix of jasmine and something musky, became a frequent ghost on his suit jackets. Anna would find it when she took them to the dry cleaners, a knot of ice forming in her stomach each time. When she tried to broach the subject, he would deploy his most potent weapon, gaslighting. "Perfume. Darling, you're being paranoid," he'd say, his tone one of amused exasperation. "I was in a meeting with a dozen people. Are you feeling all right? Maybe the stress is getting to you." He made her feel small, irrational. He was Justin Croft, the tech visionary. She was just the quiet, artistic wife, What did she know of his world? Her pregnancy, once a source of secret joy, now became a source of terror. The morning sickness was relentless, and she was constantly exhausted. She wanted to tell him to share the burden, but the right moment never came. How could she announce this life-altering news to a man who barely looked at her, who treated her like a piece of furniture in his perfectly designed life? One rainy Tuesday afternoon, she found the confirmation she had been dreading, a credit card statement carelessly left on his mahogany desk. Tucked between charges for $5,000 dinners at Per Se and a weekend charter to St. Bart's was a charge that made her blood run cold, a single transaction for $25,000 from a boutique jeweler on Madison Avenue, Cartier. It wasn't her birthday. It wasn't their anniversary. With trembling hands, she logged into their shared social media account, the one his PR team managed, but she had the password too. She navigated to Isabella Rossi's profile. And there it was, a photo posted just 2 days prior. Isabella on a yacht, the sun setting behind her. On her wrist, a glittering diamond-encrusted bracelet. A Cartier love bracelet. The caption read, "Some meteors bring the most beautiful gifts to new beginnings." The air left Anna's lungs. It wasn't just paranoia. It was real. The man she had married, the man whose child she was carrying, was weaving a completely separate life, a life in which she had no part. That evening she decided she couldn't live in the silence anymore. She had to confront him. She cooked his favorite meal, roast lamb with rosemary, hoping a semblance of their old life might soften the blow. She set the table in their formal dining room, the one they rarely used with the good china and crystal glasses. Justin arrived home just before 10. He walked into the dining room, loosening his tie, his expression annoyed. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the elaborate setup. "I told you I was eating with the board tonight." "You didn't," she replied, her voice trembling slightly. "You haven't spoken to me all day, Justin." He sighed, a long, impatient sound. "Anna, I don't have time for these games. My days are scheduled down to the minute. You can't expect me to remember to check in about dinner." The casual cruelty of his words broke something in her. "This isn't a game. This is our marriage. I found the credit card statement, Justin, the bracelet for Isabella." He didn't even have the decency to look guilty. He simply stared at her, his eyes cold and calculating. He took a sip of water, placing the glass down with a deliberate, soft click. "Isabella is a business asset," he stated, as if explaining a complex algorithm to a child. "Her father, Lorenzo Rossi, is a gatekeeper in this industry. An alliance with him through his daughter secures the next stage of my company's growth. It's a strategic move." "A strategic move," she repeated, her voice rising with disbelief. "You bought another woman a $25,000 bracelet, and you call it a strategic move. Do you hear yourself?" "I hear you being emotional and naive," he shot back, his voice turning sharp. "This is the world I operate in. It's a world you've never had to understand, thanks to me. I give you this life, this apartment, the clothes on your back. The least you can do is not question my methods." "I am your wife," she cried, the words tearing from her throat. "Not an employee, not some line item in your business plan. And what a contribution you make," he sneered, the mask of civility finally dropping to reveal the ugly contempt beneath. "You paint your little canvases that nobody sees and attend luncheons with other bored rich wives. Don't lecture me on value, Anna. You have no idea what it takes to build what I have." Every word was a physical blow. He saw her as a parasite, a decorative object he had acquired. The love she thought they had was just a transaction she hadn't understood the terms of. The fight went out of her, replaced by a hollow ache. She sank into a chair, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, to the tiny secret life she was protecting. She had to tell him now. It was the last card she had to play. Maybe, just maybe, the reality of becoming a father would shock him back into the man she thought she had married. "Justin," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "There's something else. Something you need to know." "I can't imagine what," he said, turning to leave the room. "I have an early flight to Zurich in the morning, with Isabella. We're meeting with Swiss bankers." "I'm pregnant," she said, the words falling into the vast, cold space between them. He stopped. For a moment he was perfectly still, his back to her. She held her breath, praying. She saw his shoulders tense. Then he slowly turned around. But the expression on his face wasn't shock or joy, or even concern. It was one of pure, unadulterated fury. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the sound of rain beginning to lash against the panoramic windows. Justin's face, a mask of cold fury, was terrifying. The love she had once seen in his eyes had been replaced by something chillingly transactional, as if he were analyzing a hostile takeover bid. "Pregnant," he repeated the word, dripping with venom. He walked slowly back towards the table, his movements deliberate, predatory. "You're telling me this now? I was waiting for the right time," Anna stammered, shrinking back in her chair. "The right time." He let out a short, brutal laugh. "You mean the most manipulative time? The moment you feel me slipping away, you deploy the oldest trick in the book. A baby, a leash, a pathetic, desperate anchor to keep your meal ticket from leaving." Tears welled in Anna's eyes. "No, Justin, it's not like that. This is our baby. I thought you'd be happy." "Happy?" He leaned forward, placing his hands flat on the polished mahogany table, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Let me be perfectly clear, Anna. A baby does not fit into my 5-year plan. It does not fit into the brand we are building. A baby is a complication, a distraction I neither need nor want." His words were like shards of ice in her heart. This wasn't just a rejection, it was an eradication. He was erasing their future, their child, as if it were a poorly written line of code. How can you say that?" She sobbed, her hand protectively, shielding her abdomen. Justin straightened up, his eyes sweeping over her with utter disdain. A new horrifying thought seemed to dawn on him, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "In fact," he said slowly, "the timing is a little too convenient, isn't it? My distance, as you call it, has been going on for months. How can I even be sure it's mine?" The accusation hung in the air, so vile, so monstrous, that Anna felt the world tilt on its axis. She stared at him, speechless. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, was accusing her of infidelity to deny his own child. It was the ultimate betrayal, a knife twisted in a wound he had already created. "Get out," he said, his voice flat and devoid of all emotion. "What?" she whispered, unable to process the words. "You heard me. Get out. Pack a bag. I want you gone. Now." "Justin." "No. It's pouring rain. I have nowhere to go." "I'm pregnant with your child," she pleaded, rising to her feet, her legs shaking. "That is no longer my concern," he said, turning his back on her and pulling out his phone. He started tapping on the screen. "The doorman will have instructions not to let you back in. The locks will be changed by morning. The funds in our joint account will be frozen. You are no longer Anna Croft. You are a problem I am solving." He was dismantling her life with a few taps on a screen. Panic raw and primal seized her. She ran to their bedroom, pulling open drawers, her mind a chaotic blur. What did she take? Her passport. A few sentimental items. Her entire life in this apartment felt alien, as if it belonged to someone else. She grabbed a small duffel bag and threw in some clothes, her hands shaking so violently she could barely zip it shut. She saw the little velvet box with the baby booties sitting on her nightstand. With a fresh wave of tears, she shoved it deep into the bag. When she emerged, Justin was standing by the door, holding it open, a look of profound impatience on his face. By the elevator, a stoic security guard from his personal detail, a man named Marcus, stood waiting. He wouldn't meet her eyes. "Justin, please," she begged one last time, her voice cracking. "Don't do this." He didn't answer. He simply gestured for her to leave his expression as unforgiving as a granite cliff. As she stepped past him, he spoke one final cutting sentence. "You should have known your place, Anna. You were a beautiful accessory. Nothing more." The elevator doors slid shut, sealing her off from the life she knew. Marcus escorted her down to the lobby in suffocating silence. The doorman, who usually greeted her with a warm smile, now looked at the floor, a picture of professional neutrality. He handed her a single plain black umbrella, a final insulting gesture of severance. The heavy glass doors opened, and a gust of wind and rain hit her with physical force. The city lights, once a symbol of her fairy tale life, were now a blurry, mocking watercolor. She stood on the pavement of Park Avenue, pregnant abandoned, with a small duffel bag and a cheap umbrella as her only possessions. The sound of a car pulling up to the curb caught her attention. It was Justin's town car, but it wasn't for her. The back door opened, and Isabella Rossi stepped out, shielded by the doorman's much larger umbrella. She shot Anna a brief, triumphant smirk before disappearing into the building, into the life that was once hers. Anna stood there frozen as the rain soaked through her thin shoes. She had no money, no phone. Justin had insisted on a shared plan linked to his account, which was surely already disconnected, and no one to call. Her friends had been systematically pushed out of her life by him. She was utterly, terrifyingly alone. She started walking with no destination in mind, just a desperate need to put distance between herself and the gleaming tower where her life had just been destroyed. The rain mixed with her tears, her body racked with sobs. In the heart of one of the richest cities in the world, she was destitute, invisible, a ghost haunting the streets she used to call home. The city was a hostile labyrinth. The relentless rain plastered Anna's emerald silk gown to her skin, the fine fabric now a cold, heavy shroud. The curious, pitying, or simply indifferent glances from strangers under awnings and in taxicabs felt like tiny needles against her raw nerves. Each step was an effort, the duffel bag growing heavier, a pathetic collection of the remnants of a shattered life. She walked for what felt like hours, the adrenaline and shock giving way to a bone-deep weariness. Her feet ached, the fashionable but impractical shoes Justin had bought her now instruments of torture. She found herself in a less glamorous part of the city, the towering glass facades of Midtown giving way to the brick and brownstone of a quieter neighborhood. She finally sank onto a damp bench in a small deserted park, huddling under the meager protection of a large oak tree. The reality of her situation crashed down on her with the weight of a physical blow. She was pregnant. She had no money, no home. The man she had vowed to love, honor, and cherish had not only thrown her away, but had also branded her a lacra and her unborn child illegitimate. A wave of nausea, sharp and acidic, washed over her, the familiar morning sickness, now amplified by stress and despair. Who could she turn to? Her college friends. She hadn't spoken to them in over a year. What would she say? Hi, remember me? My millionaire husband just kicked me out, and I need a place to sleep. The shame was paralyzing. Then a memory surfaced, faint and distant. A memory of a different life, a quieter life, before the glitz and glamour of Justin Croft. A life in a sprawling, book-filled house in the quiet countryside of Connecticut. A life with a father who spoke little but saw everything. Arthur Kensington. Anna had always kept her family life intensely private. Her father was not a flashy man. He didn't grace the covers of magazines or give bombastic interviews. He was old money, so old and so deeply entrenched that it had become invisible to the loud, clamoring world of new money titans like Justin. Arthur ran the Kensington Group, a private global logistics and materials conglomerate. Justin, in his arrogance, had heard the name and dismissed it. Logistics old world stuff. Boring. The future is in data. He had scoffed once after a brief formal dinner with her father. Justin had seen a quiet, tweed-wearing older gentleman and had grossly, fatally underestimated him. Anna and her father were close, but he had never approved of Justin. He'd been polite impeccably so, but she had seen the reservation in his eyes. A man who builds things to last doesn't need to shout about it. Mia. He had told her once, his gentle way of warning her. In her love-blinded state, she had dismissed it as generational caution. She never asked her father for anything. She had wanted to make her own life to not be defined by the Kensington name. But now she had nothing. Swallowing her pride, which felt like swallowing broken glass, she knew he was her only hope. She fumbled in her bag, her hand still shaking. Justin had cut off her phone, but the small, battered payphone on the corner of the park looked like a relic from another era. A miracle. She didn't have any coins. A sob of frustration escaped her lips. Ma'am, are you okay? A young woman, a student by the looks of her with a kind face and a large NYU sweatshirt, was holding out a steaming paper cup. You look like you're having a really bad night. This is hot tea. Anna looked up. Her face streaked with rain and tears. The simple act of kindness from a stranger was so overwhelming she could barely speak. Thank you, she choked out. I need to make a phone call. It's an emergency. I don't have any change. The student didn't hesitate. She dug into her pocket and produced a handful of quarters. Here, take them all. I hope things get better. She gave Anna a small, encouraging smile and hurried on her way. With trembling fingers, Anna dropped the coins into the slot and dialed the number she knew by heart. The number to her father's private study, a line that bypassed secretaries and assistants, a line he always answered. It rang twice. Arthur Kensington. His voice was exactly as she remembered, calm, steady, a rock in the storm of her life. Dad. The word came out as a broken, desperate whisper. The change in his voice was immediate. The calm businessman was gone, replaced instantly by a father who heard the terror in his child's voice. Mia. What is it? Where are you? I'm in the city. she sobbed, the story tumbling out in a torrent of incoherent, pain-filled words. "Justin, the gala, there's another woman. He kicked me out. Dad, I'm pregnant. He said it isn't his. He threw me out in the rain." She didn't need to say more. There was a moment of profound, heavy silence on the other end of the line. It wasn't a silence of shock or confusion. It was the silence of a great machine powering up of immense pressure, building behind a dam. When he spoke again, his voice was terrifyingly calm, but laced with a core of steel she had not heard since her mother passed away. "Mia, listen to me very carefully. Stop talking. Just breathe. I need you to tell me exactly where you are. A street corner, a landmark, anything." She looked around, her vision blurry. I'm in a little park. I think the street sign says Barrow Street in the West Village." "Barrow Street. Good. Do not move from that spot. Do you understand me? Don't talk to anyone. Don't go anywhere. A car will be there in 15 minutes. The driver's name is Charles. You've known him since you were a child. He will take you to the city residence. I am leaving now. I will meet you there." "Dad," she started. "We will talk when I see you, Mia," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Right now, you are my only priority. Help is on the way. Just hold on." The line went dead. Anna leaned her head against the cold, wet metal of the payphone booth, the receiver still clutched in her hand. For the first time that night, a tiny, fragile flicker of hope ignited in the cold darkness of her heart. The storm was still raging around her, but she was no longer alone. A shelter was coming. What she didn't realize was that her father wasn't just coming to save her from the storm. He was about to become a hurricane. The drive from Greenwich, Connecticut to Manhattan usually took Arthur Kensington an hour. That night, his driver, Charles, made it in 45 minutes. Arthur sat in the back of his understated but heavily armored Maybach, not speaking, not looking at the blur of lights outside. He was looking at a single photograph on his phone, a picture of Anna as a little girl, maybe 5 years old, laughing as she sat on his shoulders. Arthur Kensington was a man who moved through the world like a ghost. His power was not in the buildings that bore his name, because there were none. It was in the invisible infrastructure that held the modern world together. His company. The Kensington Group didn't create flashy apps. It owned the mines that produced the rare earth metals for the smartphones. It didn't build the electric cars. It controlled the global shipping lanes that transported the lithium-ion batteries. It didn't finance the tech startups. It held the debt of the international banks that did. He was the foundation, the bedrock upon which men like Justin Croft built their flimsy, glittering towers. And Justin had just tried to dynamite his foundation. The calm that Anna had heard on the phone was real, but it was the calm at the eye of a hurricane. Inside, a cold, precise rage was building. It wasn't the hot, messy anger of a man like Justin. It was the focused fury of a master strategist who had just had the one thing he truly valued threatened his daughter. And his unborn grandchild. Justin Croft hadn't just thrown Anna out. He had disavowed his own bloodline, and in doing so had committed an offense that in Arthur's world was unforgivable. When he arrived at the palatial pre-war apartment on Fifth Avenue, a residence his family had owned for a century and kept for quiet city stays, Anna was already there. She was wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket, sipping a hot broth prepared by the live-in housekeeper. She looked small, shattered, but safe. He knelt before her, taking her cold hands in his. "He will not touch you again," Arthur said. It was not a promise. It was a statement of fact. "He will not speak your name again." He will cease to be a factor in your life. I will handle it." After ensuring Anna was settled, and under the care of the housekeeper and a doctor he had summoned, Arthur went into his study. It was a room panelled in dark wood, lined with thousands of books. Not for show, but because he had read them all. He sat behind his large, uncluttered desk. There was no shouting, no throwing things. The lion didn't need to roar to be heard. He simply picked up the phone. His first call was to a man named Elias Vance in Geneva, the unassuming head of one of the world's most powerful private wealth management firms. "Elias," Arthur said, his voice calm. "It's Arthur Kensington." "Arthur." "It's the middle of the night here, but for you, I'm always awake. What can I do for you?" "I need you to initiate a full aggressive short position on Croft Innovations. Ticker symbol CI. Use the entirety of the K7 discretionary fund. And I need you to quietly advise our partners, specifically Takahashi-san and the Sheikh, that we are divesting from anything and everything associated with Justin Croft. Advise them that our internal analysis shows a catastrophic failure in leadership and a fundamental rot in the company's ethical core. The risk is untenable." There was a pause on the other end. The K7 fund was a multi-billion-dollar instrument of financial warfare used only in the most extreme circumstances. "Understood, Arthur. Is there a timeline?" "Sunrise, New York time. I want the markets to open to the smell of blood in the water." His second call was to a woman named Lena Petrova in London, the formidable CEO of a global logistics network that was a subsidiary of the Kensington Group. "Lena, I have a priority task. I need a complete supply chain disruption for a company called Croft Innovations. I want their component suppliers in Taiwan and South Korea to suddenly encounter crippling logistical hurdles. I want their shipping containers to be subject to unforeseen customs inspections in every port, from Shanghai to Los Angeles. I want their cloud server contracts with our data farm partners in Ireland to be reviewed for immediate termination due to breaches of service-level agreements. Bleed him dry. Make it impossible for him to build or ship his product." "Consider it done, Arthur," Lena replied, her voice crisp. "He will be on an island by noon tomorrow." His third call was to a man much closer to home. Marcus Thorne, the head of the powerful banking conglomerate that held the primary business loans for Croft Innovations. Thorne owed his career and his bank's solvency during the 2008 crisis to a quiet, unpublicized bailout from Arthur Kensington. "Marcus, I'm calling in favor." Marcus Thorne didn't hesitate. "Name it." "Justin Croft. Croft Innovations. I want you to call in his lines of credit. All of them. Cite a violation of the morality clause in his loan covenants. I'm sure your lawyers can find one. Failure to maintain a stable personal life, reflecting sound judgment perhaps. I want his access to capital severed. Completely." "Arthur, that will bankrupt him." "I'm aware," Arthur said, his voice flat. His final call was to a man named David Chen, his personal lawyer and fixer. "David, I have a personal matter. I need you to begin divorce proceedings on behalf of my daughter Anna Kensington. Not Croft. Kensington. The grounds will be extreme cruelty and adultery. I want you to be ruthless. We are not settling. We are dismantling. And I need you to leak a story. Not to the tabloids, but to a respectable financial journal. A story about the volatile, erratic, and deeply unstable behavior of Croft Innovations' CEO. Frame it as a cautionary tale for investors about founders with unchecked egos. Use an anonymous source, a concerned board member. Make him radioactive. By the time he hung up the phone, the first hints of dawn were breaking over the city. It had taken less than an hour. 4 phone calls. He hadn't raised his voice. He had simply pulled 4 threads from the tapestry of the global economy. But he knew that by pulling those specific threads, Justin Croft's entire world was about to unravel. The lion had awoken, and the hunt had begun. Justin Croft woke up the next morning, feeling invincible. Anna was gone, a minor inconvenience swiftly dealt with. Isabella had spent the night, a warm and compliant symbol of his new upgraded life. He felt powerful, untethered, ready to conquer his meeting with the Swiss bankers. He strode into his office at 7:00 a.m. The city spread out beneath him, his for the taking. The first sign that something was wrong came at 9:31 a.m., 1 minute after the stock market opened. His CFO, a perpetually nervous man named George, burst into his office without knocking his face ashen. "Justin, you need to see this," George stammered, pointing at the massive screen on the wall, displaying their stock ticker. The symbol CI was accompanied by a brutal downward-pointing red arrow. It had opened down 20% in the first minute of trading. "What the hell is this?" Justin barked. "Is there a bad press release I don't know about?" "No, nothing. It's a sell-off, a massive one. It looks coordinated. Someone is shorting us into oblivion." Before Justin could process this, his phone rang. It was the head of their primary supplier in Taiwan. "Mr. Croft," the man said, his voice strained. "We have a problem. A big problem. All of our shipments to you, every single one, have been flagged for a Level 5 customs inspection. The containers are sealed. They're telling me it could be weeks, maybe months." Justin's blood ran cold. "That's impossible. We have priority status. Not anymore, it seems. And our raw material provider just cancelled our contract. They cited force majeure. It makes no sense." As he hung up, an alert popped up on his screen. It was an article from the Wall Street Journal. The headline read, "Cracks in the Croft Kingdom Sources Cite Erratic Leadership Question CEO's Stability." The article was a masterpiece of character assassination, quoting anonymous insiders who worried about Justin's volatile temperament and reckless personal decisions, hinting that the company was a house of cards built on the ego of one man. His company phone began to ring incessantly. The server farm in Ireland was terminating their contract effective immediately. Their biggest logistics partner had just declared bankruptcy, freezing their entire inventory in a legal black hole. It was a cascade, an avalanche of catastrophic failures, all happening at once. It wasn't random. It was a demolition. At 11:00 a.m., the call he dreaded came. It was Marcus Thorne from the bank. "Justin." Thorne's voice was cold formal. "Pursuant to Section 11B of your credit agreement, we are calling in your outstanding loans effective immediately. We have reason to believe you represent an unacceptable risk to the bank." "Unacceptable risk," Justin screamed into the phone. "You begged me to take that money a year ago. We are your flagship tech investment. Circumstances have changed. You have 24 hours to present a repayment plan, or we begin asset seizure proceedings." The line went dead. Justin stared at the phone in his hand. He was ruined. Utterly, completely ruined. In the span of 3 hours, his billion-dollar empire had been reduced to rubble. He stumbled back from his desk, his mind racing. Who could do this? Who had this kind of power? The Russians? The Chinese? A corporate rival? He thought of Lorenzo Rossi. Isabella's father. Was this some kind of power play? He called Isabella, his voice frantic. "Isabella, it's me. My company. It's collapsing. Is this your father? Is this some kind of twisted game to force a merger?" Isabella's voice on the other end was no longer warm and seductive. It was flat and dismissive. "My father, Justin, don't be ridiculous. He wouldn't waste his time on a company as over-leveraged as yours. We saw your financials this morning. You're a sinking ship." "We, Isabella, what are you talking about?" "You were in my bed last night. That was business, Justin," she said coolly. "And you are no longer good for business. I have a lunch meeting. Goodbye." He was alone. Everyone was abandoning him. He paced his office like a caged animal. The view of the city, now a mocking testament to how far he had to fall. He racked his brain trying to find the source, the epicenter of his destruction. Who did he cross? Who did he anger? And then a memory surfaced. A quiet dinner. A man in a tweed jacket. Anna's father. Arthur Kensington. The boring logistics guy. He remembered the look in the old man's eyes, a quiet, analytical intelligence that he had mistaken for weakness. He remembered Anna mentioning in passing that her father's company moves things. He had never bothered to ask more. He had never even bothered to Google the man's name properly. With a sense of dawning horror, Justin stumbled to his computer and typed Arthur Kensington, the Kensington Group, into the search bar. The results were sparse. No glossy profiles, no interviews. Just dense, dry financial reports, mentions in obscure shipping journals, and listings on the boards of global consortiums that controlled everything from deep-sea mineral rights to satellite communications. He wasn't just in logistics. He was logistics. He was the invisible hand that moved the global economy. Justin fell into his chair, the truth hitting him like a physical blow. It wasn't a rival. It wasn't a foreign government. It was Anna's father. The quiet, unassuming man he had dismissed as an irrelevant relic. He hadn't just kicked out a penniless artist wife. He had declared war on a hidden king. A king who had just erased his kingdom from the map with a handful of quiet phone calls. He thought of his last words to her, "You should have known your place." The irony was crushing. It was he who had never understood him. He had been a noisy child playing with blocks in the shadow of a mountain, and he had just tried to insult the mountain itself. 6 months later, the New York winter had given way to a gentle spring. In the sun-drenched solarium of the Kensington estate in Connecticut, Anna sat in a comfortable armchair, sketching in a charcoal pad. Her baby bump was prominent now, a beautiful round testament to the new life growing within her. She was no longer the frail, haunted woman who had stood shivering in the rain. Her face had a calm radiance, her eyes a new-found wisdom. The pain was still there, a scar on her heart, but it no longer defined her. The name Justin Croft was now a ghost, a whispered cautionary tale on Wall Street. His company had been carved up and sold for parts to pay his creditors. He had lost the penthouse, the cars, everything. The last Anna had heard, he was living in a small apartment in Queens, facing a mountain of personal lawsuits from investors. He had tried to contact her once, a rambling, desperate email that her father's security team had intercepted. It was a pathetic plea, not for forgiveness, but for her to call off her father. He still didn't understand. It was never about revenge. It was about consequences. Arthur Kensington walked into the solarium holding 2 cups of herbal tea. He had aged slightly in the past few months, but his eyes were clear and steady. He had spent the time not just dismantling Justin's life, but carefully, lovingly helping Anna rebuild hers. "How are my 2 favorite artists feeling today?" he asked, his voice soft, as he handed her a cup and placed a gentle hand on her belly. "The little one is practicing their river dance routine, I think." Anna laughed, a genuine, happy sound. "And I'm okay, Dad. Really." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the birds at a feeder outside the window. "I never thanked you properly," Anna said quietly, looking at her father. "For what you did." Arthur set his cup down, his expression serious. "Mia, I didn't do it for me. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it for you and for this child. That man in his arrogance tried to make you both disappear. He tried to deny your existence and your child's legitimacy. He believed that his money gave him the power to erase people. I simply removed his power. Permanently. He will never have the resources to harm you or anyone else again. That is not revenge. That is protection." Anna nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. This time, it wasn't a tear of sorrow, but of gratitude. She finally understood the nature of her father's power. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was quiet, immense, and used only to protect what he loved. It was the difference between a firework, which explodes for a moment of glory, and the sun, which provides warmth and life day after day. A few weeks later, Anna gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Arthur. As she held her son for the first time, looking down at his tiny, perfect face, she felt a profound sense of peace. The storm had passed. She had been broken, but she had not been destroyed. She had emerged stronger, with a clearer understanding of the world and her place in it. Her gilded cage was gone, and in its place was a true home, filled not with the cold gleam of wealth, but with the unconditional warmth of a family's love. She had found her new beginning not in a penthouse overlooking the city, but in the quiet, powerful love for the new life she held in her arms. 2 years passed. In the fertile quiet of the Connecticut countryside, life blossomed. Little Arthur, whom Anna affectionately called Archie, grew from a tiny, helpless infant into a curious, toddling boy, with his mother's gentle eyes and a laugh that echoed his grandfather's deep chuckle. The trauma of Anna's past had not vanished, but it had receded, transforming from a gaping wound into a faint, silvery scar, a reminder of a battle fought and won. Anna was no longer just a survivor. She was a creator. She had channeled her experiences, her pain, and her rediscovery of self into her art. With her father's quiet backing, she opened a small independent gallery in the nearby town of Greenwich, a space dedicated to showcasing the work of emerging underrepresented artists. It was a success not because it made a vast amount of money, but because it built a community. She had found her purpose not as an accessory to a powerful man, but as a facilitator of beauty and a champion for other quiet voices. She was, for the first time in her adult life, wholly and completely herself. Her world was peaceful, ordered, and filled with a love that was as reliable as the sunrise. The chaotic, brittle glamour of her life with Justin felt like a story she had read about someone else. One crisp October Tuesday, business called her back into the city. One of her gallery's most promising young sculptors was having a piece installed at a corporate lobby in Midtown Manhattan, and Anna had promised to be there to oversee it. She left Archie in the doting care of his grandfather and took the morning train in feeling a sense of competence and calm that would have been unimaginable 2 years prior. The city no longer felt like a labyrinth of painful memories. It was just a place of business, a grid of streets and avenues she could navigate with cool efficiency. After the successful installation, She decided to walk a few blocks to grab a coffee before heading back to Grand Central. The autumn air was invigorating, and the rhythm of the city was a familiar beat. She was waiting at a crosswalk on Madison Avenue, checking an email on her phone, when a voice from her past cut through the noise of the traffic. "Anna!" The voice was thinner, stripped of its characteristic arrogance and command. It was hesitant, almost reedy. She looked up, and her heart gave a single, hard jolt. It was Justin Croft. The man standing before her was a ghost, a pale imitation of the Titan she had known. The bespoke Tom Ford suit was gone, replaced by an ill-fitting off-the-rack department store suit that seemed to hang on his frame. His formerly perfect hair was thinning. His sharp jawline had softened into something jowly and tired, and his eyes, once blazing with predatory ambition, were dull and bloodshot. He looked defeated, not just financially but spiritually. The vital, cruel energy that had once animated him was gone, leaving behind a hollow shell. "Justin," she said, her voice steady. She was surprised to find that she felt no fear, no surge of anger, only a profound, sad pity. "It really is you." He breathed a strange, desperate look on his face. I can't believe it. You look amazing." "I'm well, Justin," she replied politely, the walk sign flashing across the street. She had no desire to prolong the encounter. "Wait, please," he said, taking a half step toward her, his hand slightly raised as if to touch her arm, before thinking better of it. "Just a minute, please. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I have to know. The baby, was it a boy or a girl?" Anna looked at him, at this man who had tried to deny his own child's existence, now asking about him as if he were inquiring about a forgotten stock portfolio. "I have a son," she said, her tone cool and final. "He is happy and healthy." A flicker of something regret, pain, self-pity crossed Justin's face. "A son," he repeated softly. Does he look like me?" "He looks like himself," Anna said, refusing to give him even that small piece of connection. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a train to catch." She turned to step off the curb, but his next words stopped her. "I'm sorry, Anna." He blurted out the words, sounding rusty and unused. "Everything I did, it was a mistake. I was a fool. I was arrogant. I lost everything. I lost you. I think about it every day. I see now. You were the only real thing in my life." His apology, which once would have been everything she yearned to hear, now felt like a handful of dust. It was too little, far too late, and it was tainted by the stench of his self-pity. He wasn't sorry for what he did to her. He was sorry for what had happened to him. "Apology not accepted, Justin," she said, turning back to face him fully. Her voice was not harsh, but it held the unyielding strength of forged steel. "An apology is for spilling a drink, not for trying to destroy a person, not for abandoning your pregnant wife and disowning your unborn child. You didn't just make a mistake. You revealed exactly who you are. I'm grateful for it, because it sets me free." He stared at her, speechless. He had expected tears or anger, or perhaps a flicker of her old affection. He was not prepared for this calm, unshakable strength. "I have a son to get home to," she said, her voice softening slightly, not for him, but for the thought of Archie. "He has a wonderful life, a peaceful life, surrounded by people who love him unconditionally. He has everything he needs. He doesn't need a father who would have seen him as a liability in a 5-year plan. With that, she turned and walked away. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She could feel his eyes on her, a ghost on the pavement, watching his last chance at redemption walk away. She crossed the street, merged with the anonymous crowd, and never saw Justin Croft again. The echo of their past had finally faded, and all that was left was the sound of her own steady footsteps walking toward the future. So ends the story of Anna Kensington and Justin Croft. It's a powerful reminder that true strength isn't always loud. It isn't measured in stock prices or flashy awards. Sometimes it's the quiet, unwavering love of a father. It's the resilience of a mother protecting her unborn child. Justin Croft made the fatal mistake of confusing wealth with power and arrogance with strength. He learned the hard way that when you try to harm someone, you never know whose protection they are under. Anna left with nothing found that she actually had everything that truly mattered. If Anna's story of resilience and justice resonated with you, if you believe that true character is revealed not in victory, but in how we treat those we perceive as lesser, then please show your support. Hit that like button to let us know this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs to hear about the quiet power of family. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more tales of karma justice and the incredible strength of the human spirit. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light. Thank you for listening. He stood at the center of the grand ballroom, a king in his castle of glass and steel. Dominic Davenport, with his perfect suit and even more perfect fiancée, Tiffany, glittering on his arm, was the master of his universe. Across the room, hidden in the soft shadows, stood his ex-wife Audrey. To him, she was a ghost of a forgotten past, a woman he had discarded and assumed had faded into obscurity. He was about to make the biggest announcement of his career. What he didn't know was that the woman he had so carelessly broken was the one person who held the power to shatter his entire legacy. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, nestled between a utility bill and a catalogue for gardening supplies. It was thick, creamy cardstock, the kind of paper that felt heavy with the weight of money. The calligraphy, a swirl of gold ink, spelled out a name she hadn't identified with for 5 long years, Mrs. Audrey Davenport. A line was drawn through Davenport with a thin, almost apologetic pen stroke, and underneath Sterling was written in plain, neat print. It was an invitation to the 10th annual Davenport Foundation Gala, the glittering pinnacle of the city's social calendar. For Audrey, it was a summons from a past she had painstakingly buried. She ran her thumb over the embossed crest of the Davenport Corporation, a stylized D, intertwined with a lion. It used to be her crest, her life. Now it was just a symbol of a gilded cage she had barely escaped. Why would he invite her? 5 years had passed since the divorce. 5 years of séance. 5 years since Dominic Davenport, her husband of a decade, had sat across from her in a sterile lawyer's office and calmly explained that their marriage was no longer a valuable asset to his portfolio. He was trading up, he'd implied, for a newer model. That model, Tiffany Monroe, was a 20-something influencer whose only discernible talent was looking stunning in his Instagram posts. The settlement had been a joke, a calculated insult. Dominic's lawyers had painted her as a simple housewife with no contribution to his billion-dollar empire, conveniently ignoring the late nights she'd spent helping him prep for board meetings, the social events she'd orchestrated to perfection, to charm investors, and the personal dreams she'd sacrificed to support his. He had left her with just enough to be comfortable, but not enough to be a threat. It was a golden severance package designed to ensure she disappeared quietly, and for 5 years she had. She'd moved out of their palatial penthouse and into a modest but charming brownstone across town. She'd sold the designer clothes, the jewelry, the life that had been curated for her. She had, in every sense of the word, started over from nothing. Her friends from that life, the wives of Dominic's business partners, had dropped her as quickly as their husbands dropped a failing stock. She was no longer relevant. Holding the invitation, Audrey felt a familiar cold knot tighten in her stomach. The gala. That event had been her stage, but also her prison. She remembered the last one she'd attended as Dominic's wife. He had belittled her in front of a senator because her opinion on a new urban development project, a project she'd actually studied extensively, differed from his. "My wife is a romantic gentleman," he'd said with a patronizing chuckle. "She dreams of trees and parks. I, on the other hand, dream of progress and profit." The men had all laughed, and she had felt herself shrink until she was nothing more than the shimmering sequins on her dress. That was Dominic's signature move, public charm and private cruelty. He could build her up with a whispered compliment one moment, and tear her down with a dismissive wave of his hand the next. She walked to her kitchen window, which overlooked a small garden she'd cultivated herself. Roses, her favorite, climbed a weathered trellis. Her life now was simple. It was quiet. It was hers. Why would she risk reopening those wounds? Why step back into the lion's den? Her finger traced the edge of the card. Maybe that was it. He didn't see her as a threat. To him, she was a closed chapter, a forgotten memory. This invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was a flex. It was Dominic in his infinite arrogance, wanting to display his new life, his perfect fiancée, and his ever-growing success, and he needed his discarded past there as a backdrop to show just how far he'd come. He was probably picturing her showing up in a sensible off-the-rack dress, looking worn and regretful, a cautionary tale for all to see. He wanted to see her humbled. A slow fire, one she hadn't felt in years, began to smoulder in her chest. For 5 years, she had worked in the shadows. She had rebuilt herself brick by painful brick, not for revenge, but for survival. She had forged a new identity, one that had nothing to do with being Mrs. Davenport. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time the ghost returned to the feast. She looked at her reflection in the dark glass of the window. The woman looking back was no longer the timid, eager-to-please girl who had married a billionaire. Her eyes held a new depth, a resilience forged in solitude and hard work. Her hands, though often smudged with charcoal from her drafting table, were strong. "Okay, Dominic," she whispered to the empty room. "If you want a show, I'll give you one." She placed the invitation on her desk not as a painful reminder, but as a promise. She wouldn't just attend the gala. She would walk back into his world, not as the woman he left, but as the woman she had become. And this time, she wouldn't be the one to shrink. The decision to attend the gala dredged up memories Audrey had locked away in the deepest vaults of her mind. The decade with Dominic wasn't a simple story of a villain and a victim. It was far more insidious than that. It had started as a fairy tale. She was a bright, ambitious architectural student, and he was the dynamic, visionary real estate mogul who'd guest lectured at her university. He'd been captivated by her passion, her innovative ideas about sustainable, human-centric design. "You don't just see buildings, Audrey," he had told her on their third date, his eyes burning with an intensity that felt like adoration. You see homes, you see communities, you see the future. He had swept her off her feet. He championed her work, praised her intellect, and made her feel like the most brilliant woman in the world. She fell in love not just with the man, but with the future he painted for them, a partnership he'd called it. They would build an empire together, his business acumen and her creative vision. She dropped out of her master's program, just one semester shy of finishing, because he convinced her that real-world experience at his side was worth more than any degree. The first few years of their marriage were a blur of excitement. She had a seat at his table, offering insights on blueprints, suggesting materials, and helping shape the aesthetic of the early Davenport projects. But slowly, subtly, the dynamic began to shift. Her suggestions became cute ideas. Her contributions were helpful input on his grand designs. The partnership he'd promised became an apprenticeship, and then a glorified assistantship. The real turning point came with the Eden Project, a concept she had poured her soul into. It was a revolutionary mixed-use development, designed around green roofs, communal gardens, and recycled water systems. It was her masterpiece. She worked on it for months, creating detailed renderings and a comprehensive proposal. She presented it to him in his home office, her heart thrumming with nervous excitement. He listened patiently, a small, unreadable smile on his face. When she finished, he leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. "It's a beautiful dream, darling. Truly." He said, his tone soft, but laced with something she couldn't quite place. "But it's not practical. The profit margins are too thin. The technology is unproven. The market wants luxury, Audrey, not lettuce on the roof." He took her core concepts, stripped them of their soul, and handed them over to his corporate architectural team. They transformed her vibrant, community-focused vision into a sterile, high-gloss tower of glass and steel. He called it Davenport Heights, and it made him a fortune. When a magazine article praised his pioneering vision in urban development, he didn't even mention her. When she confronted him hurt and confused, he simply shrugged. "Business is business, Audrey. Don't take it so personally," he'd said, adjusting his tie. "Besides, your name is on the company in a way. You're Mrs. Davenport. That's your contribution." That was the moment she understood. She wasn't his partner. She was a possession. Her role was to be beautiful, to be gracious, to host his parties, and to validate his genius. Her own brilliance was a threat, something to be absorbed and repurposed for his own glory. From then on, she tried to carve out a space for herself, suggesting smaller charity projects or design competitions. But he always found a way to gently dissuade her. "Focus on the foundation, darling. That's where you can really make a difference," he'd say, steering her toward galas and fundraisers, safe feminine pursuits that wouldn't encroach on his territory. The arrival of Tiffany Monroe was merely the final brutal confirmation of her irrelevance. Tiffany was everything Audrey was, not young, uncomplicated, and utterly devoid of any ambition beyond being seen. She was the perfect accessory, a human handbag that looked good in photos and asked for nothing more than his credit card. The divorce was a masterclass in psychological warfare. Dominic's lawyers used her abandoned master's degree against her, arguing she had no career prospects and was entirely dependent on him. They presented her as a woman who had happily chosen a life of leisure. Her own lawyer, overwhelmed by the Davenport legal machine, advised her to take the settlement and run. "You won't win against him, Audrey," the weary man had said. "He'll bury you in legal fees and drag your name through the mud. Take the money. Start a new life. Forget him." So she did. The money, a pittance compared to his vast wealth, felt like blood money. But she took it. And as she signed the papers, watching Dominic's impassive face, she made a silent vow. He thought he had erased her. He thought he had won. He was wrong. He had only set her free. The cage was open. Now she just had to remember how to fly. The first year after the divorce was the hardest. The silence in her new, smaller home was deafening. The loneliness was a physical weight. There were days she barely got out of bed, the ghost of Dominic's final words echoing in her mind. "You'll be lost without me, Audrey. You have no idea how the real world works." For a while, she almost believed him. The world she had known for a decade had vanished overnight. The friends who'd once flocked to her dinner parties now crossed the street to avoid her. She was a social pariah, the discarded wife. The shame was a constant companion. But beneath the shame and the grief, the fire she thought had been extinguished was flickering back to life. It started with a sketchbook. She found it in an old book, its pages filled with the designs and ideas from her university days, the dreams she had before Dominic. She began to draw again, first tentatively, then with a feverish passion. She drew buildings that breathed homes, that integrated with nature spaces that nurtured the soul. The drawings weren't enough. She needed to build. With a significant portion of her settlement money, she quietly re-enrolled in her master's program. At 35, she was a decade older than most of her classmates. They saw a quiet, impeccably dressed woman who kept to herself. They had no idea she used to run a household with a staff of 20 and organize parties for world leaders. She humbled herself, became a student again, and absorbed everything. She didn't just finish her degree. She graduated at the top of her class. Her final thesis on zero-carbon urban infrastructure, winning a prestigious university award. The award gave her a flicker of confidence. She used the remainder of her settlement to lease a tiny office space in a less than glamorous part of the city and founded her own architectural firm. She called it Phoenix Designs. It was a defiant statement to herself. She was rising from the ashes of her old life. Business did not come easily. The big clients wanted established names, not a one-woman firm run by an unknown. So she started small. She designed a community garden pavilion for a non-profit. She renovated a small bookstore, creating a beautiful light-filled space on a shoestring budget. She took on projects no one else wanted, pouring her heart and soul into every single one. She was architect, project manager, and office administrator all in one. There were nights she slept on a cot in her office, surrounded by blueprints and empty coffee cups, wondering if Dominic had been right after all. Her breakthrough came from an unlikely source. An eccentric tech billionaire, a man named Sebastian Cole, had been trying for years to build a truly sustainable and self-sufficient corporate headquarters. He'd fired 3 major architectural firms, claiming they didn't understand his vision. He wanted a building that was a living organism, not a monument to corporate ego. He stumbled upon an article about her bookstore renovation in a small independent design blog. Intrigued by the innovative use of reclaimed materials and natural light, he summoned her to his office. Audrey went in with no expectations, armed only with her portfolio of small projects and her unwavering belief in her design philosophy. She didn't try to impress him. She just spoke her truth. She talked about buildings that heal, that connect people to their environment, that give back more than they take. She spread her sketches across his desk, her hands moving with the passion of an artist. Sebastian Cole, a man known for his brutal impatience, listened for 2 hours without interruption. At the end, he simply pointed to one of her most ambitious sketches, a concept for a building powered by geothermal energy with a cascading vertical farm on its facade. "Can you build that?" he asked. "Yes," she said without a hint of hesitation. "You're hired," he declared. The Cole Innovations campus became her masterpiece. It took 2 years of relentless work, but the result was breathtaking. It was a marvel of green architecture, a testament to everything she believed in. When it was unveiled, it didn't just make headlines. It sent shockwaves through the industry. It won every major architectural award that year. The name on everyone's lips was Phoenix Designs, and its mysterious, brilliant founder, A. Sterling. She had been meticulous about her privacy. She insisted on being credited as A. Sterling, using her maiden name. She declined interviews and photo ops, letting the work speak for itself. She knew that the moment the world connected A. Sterling to Audrey, the ex-Mrs. Davenport, the narrative would shift. They would credit her success to her divorce settlement, to Dominic's lingering influence. She refused to let his shadow touch what she had built with her own 2 hands. So while Dominic continued to build his cold, sterile monuments to wealth, Audrey, in complete anonymity, was quietly revolutionizing the industry he claimed to dominate. She had become one of the most sought-after architects in the country, all while he remained blissfully ignorant. He had cast her out, assuming she would wither. He never imagined she would find her own sun and grow. The night of the gala arrived with a cool autumn breeze. Audrey stood before the full-length mirror in her bedroom, a stranger to the woman staring back at her. For 5 years, her wardrobe had consisted of practical trousers, simple blouses, and comfortable flats. Tonight, she was dressed for war. The dress was a custom creation from a designer she had personally commissioned. It wasn't flashy or ostentatious. It was a masterpiece of understated elegance, a column of deep emerald silk that flowed like liquid. It had a deceptively simple cut that hinted at the strength of the body beneath. It was the color of new growth of life. She wore no necklace, only a pair of subtle diamond earrings and a single stunning emerald ring on her right hand, a gift she had bought for herself after landing the Cole contract. Her hair, once always styled in a soft, demure updo Dominic preferred, was now cut in a chic, sharp bob that framed her face, highlighting the confidence in her eyes. As the car pulled up to the magnificent glass facade of the Davenport Tower, the very building that had replaced her Eden project, Audrey felt a tremor of the old fear. The flashing cameras, the throngs of reporters, the parade of the city's wealthiest and most powerful people, it was a world she had run from. But as she stepped out of the car, she straightened her shoulders. She was not the same woman who had last walked this red carpet. She wasn't Dominic Davenport's wife. She was A. Sterling of Phoenix Designs. She was here on her own terms. She bypassed the main scrum of reporters, her name not yet registering on their radar of A-listers. She walked into the ballroom, and for a moment the sheer opulence took her breath away. It was exactly as she remembered, only more so. Mountains of flowers, rivers of champagne, and a veritable galaxy of chandeliers glittering overhead. It was a monument to Dominic's success, a spectacle designed to awe and intimidate. She took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and found a quiet alcove with a view of the entire room. From her vantage point, she watched the scene unfold. She saw familiar faces, people who had once been her friends, who now looked right through her, their eyes scanning the room for someone more important. The sting of it was dull now, a scar rather than an open wound. Then she saw him. Dominic was holding court near the grand staircase, a circle of sycophants hanging on his every word. He looked exactly the same, impeccably tailored suit, a confident smile that never quite reached his eyes, an aura of untouchable power. And on his arm, dripping in diamonds that Audrey knew he'd bought to match her own discarded engagement ring, was Tiffany Monroe. Tiffany was stunning in the way a perfect sterile doll is stunning. Her gown was a confection of white feathers and sequins designed to attract maximum attention. She laughed a little too loudly at Dominic's jokes, her hand possessively on his chest. They were the picture of a power couple, a portrait of success. Audrey watched them, but she felt no jealousy. Not anymore. What she felt was a profound sense of distance, as if she were watching characters in a play. She saw the hollowness behind Dominic's smile and the desperate insecurity in Tiffany's eyes. She had once been a part of that play, had known her lines by heart. Now she was just an observer in the audience. For a good hour she simply watched, nursing her champagne. People milled around her, their conversations, a buzz of stock prices, summer yachts and petty gossip. No one recognized her. Her transformation was so complete that she had become invisible, a ghost in plain sight. It was exactly what she wanted. The power of anonymity was a shield. Eventually, a man with a kind, weathered face approached her. He was Walter Abernathy, the longtime chairman of the Davenport Foundation's board. He was one of the few people from her old life who had always treated her with genuine respect. "Audrey," he asked, his eyes widening in surprise. "My goodness, is that really you? You look absolutely radiant." "Hello, Walter," she said with a warm smile. "It's been a long time." "It has indeed. I was so sorry to hear about, well, everything," he said, his gaze flicking towards Dominic. "His loss, my dear. His profound loss." They spoke for a few minutes, a comfortable conversation that was a balm to her soul. As he was about to leave, he leaned in conspiratorially. "Big night for Dominic," he said, lowering his voice. "He's announcing the lead architect for the new Legacy Tower. Thinks it's going to be his crowning achievement. He's been insufferable about it for weeks." Audrey simply smiled, a small, secret smile. "Is that so? I can't wait to hear all about it, Mr. Abernathy gave her a curious look, sensing something had shifted in the woman he used to know. But he couldn't put his finger on what it was. He excused himself and melted back into the crowd. Audrey finished her champagne. The calm was over. The storm was about to begin. She saw Dominic's eyes scanning the room, and she knew sooner or later they would find her. She was ready. It happened as she was admiring a sculpture near the terrace doors. A sudden hush fell over the cluster of people nearest to her, a subtle shift in the room's energy that she felt before she saw its cause. She turned slowly, her heart beating a steady, calm rhythm. Dominic and Tiffany stood before her. Dominic's face was a mask of controlled surprise, his eyes sweeping over her in a quick, dismissive appraisal. It was the same look he used to give a piece of art he was considering buying, calculating its value, its worthiness. Tiffany, however, made no attempt to hide her disdain. Her perfectly sculpted lips curled into a sneer as her eyes raked over Audrey's dress, her hair, her very presence. "Well, well," Dominic said, his voice smooth as silk, but with an edge of steel. "Audrey, I have to admit I'm surprised you came." "You sent an invitation, Dominic," Audrey replied, her own voice, even and calm, betraying none of the turmoil she'd expected to feel. "I thought it would be rude not to." "How quaint of you," Tiffany chimed in, stepping forward slightly, a deliberate move to assert her position at Dominic's side. She ran a hand over her own diamond necklace. "I just adore your dress. It's so simple. Did you make it yourself?" The insult was as clumsy as it was cruel. The old Audrey would have flushed with shame, stammered a defense. The new Audrey simply smiled. "Thank you, Tiffany. It's a lietier, The designer is a personal friend. I find his work has a certain integrity that's so rare these days. Don't you?" Tiffany's smile faltered. She had never heard of Lietier, but she knew from Audrey's tone that she had just made a fool of herself. The name was whispered among the most exclusive circles, a designer known for dressing quiet royalty, not flashy influencers. Dominic, ever the master of social chess, stepped in to recover. Audrey was always a fan of the artisanal. He said the word, dripping with condescension. "So tell me, what have you been doing with yourself? Keeping busy? I hope I always worried you'd be terribly bored." This was the moment he'd been waiting for. The public inquiry into her diminished life. He wanted her to describe a quiet existence of gardening and book clubs, a life that would highlight the dazzling success of his own. "I've been very busy, thank you," Audrey said, her gaze steady. "I started a small business. It keeps me occupied." "Oh, a business," Tiffany exclaimed with mock delight. "How lovely is it, an Etsy shop, I hear. Those are very popular for hobbies." The venom in her voice was palpable. Audrey could feel the eyes of the people around them watching the unfolding drama with barely concealed glee. This was the blood sport of the rich. "Something like that," Audrey said, her calm unbreachable. She refused to give them the satisfaction of a reaction. She turned her attention back to Dominic. "I hear you're making a big announcement tonight. The Legacy Tower, isn't it?" "It sounds very ambitious." Dominic's chest puffed out. This was his territory. "It's more than ambitious, Audrey. It's revolutionary. It will be the tallest, most technologically advanced, and most iconic building on this coast. It's my legacy." He said the last word with a reverence that was almost religious. "He's been working so hard on it," Tiffany cooed, stroking his arm. "And of course I'm helping. I'm personally curating the entire aesthetic for the penthouse residences. My followers are just dying for a sneak peek." "I'm sure they are," Audrey said, her tone flat. "An undertaking of that scale must require an extraordinary architectural vision. You must have hired the best of the best." A smug, self-satisfied smirk spread across Dominic's face. This was the opening he wanted. This was his checkmate. "We have," he said, his voice booming slightly as he began to project to their growing audience. "The firm we chose is without a doubt the most innovative, the most brilliant in the world right now. You've probably never heard of them. They're very exclusive." He looked at her, his eyes glinting with triumph. He saw her as she was 5 years ago, the woman whose dreams he had crushed, the wife he had deemed unworthy. He was about to unveil a monument to his own genius, and she was here in her simple dress and with her small business to witness it all. The symmetry was in his mind perfect. "Well, don't keep us in suspense," Audrey said, taking a deliberate sip of her water. "I'm fascinated to know who could possibly meet your exacting standards." "All in good time," Dominic said, patting her shoulder with a familiarity that made her skin crawl. "Don't you worry. You'll have a front row seat to see what a real vision looks like." With a final dismissive nod, he steered Tiffany away, leaving Audrey standing in the wake of their arrogance. She watched them go, her expression unreadable. She felt the pitying looks from the onlookers. They thought they had just witnessed her utter humiliation. They had no idea they had just seen the prologue. The main event was about to begin. Half an hour later, the lights in the grand ballroom dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight illuminated the grand stage at the far end of the room, where a lectern bearing the Davenport Corporation crest stood waiting. This was the moment the entire evening had been building towards. Dominic Davenport strode onto the stage to a wave of enthusiastic applause. He stood at the lectern, basking in the adoration, a conqueror surveying his domain. He tapped the microphone, and his deep, confident voice filled the cavernous space. "Friends, partners, leaders of this great city," he began, his arms spread wide. "Welcome. Tonight we are not just celebrating the work of the Davenport Foundation. We are celebrating the future. A future that we together will build." Audrey stood near the back, partially concealed by a large marble column. She watched him, a clinical detachment settling over her. He was a masterful performer. She had to give him that. He knew how to command a room, how to weave a narrative of power and progress that left everyone feeling inspired and, more importantly, eager to invest. He spoke for 10 minutes about the Foundation's charitable works, donations he had approved, but which she knew were orchestrated and managed by people like Walter Abernathy. Then he seamlessly transitioned to his true purpose for the evening. "For years, the Davenport Corporation has not just built buildings. We have shaped the skyline of this city. We have created landmarks," he declared. Behind him, a massive screen flickered to life, showing a dramatic computer-generated video of his past projects. But what comes next will redefine the very concept of a landmark. It is a project born of audacity, of innovation, of a relentless pursuit of perfection. I'm talking, of course, about the Legacy Tower. The screen behind him changed to a stunning, futuristic rendering of a skyscraper that seemed to pierce the clouds. It was a twisting, crystalline structure, gleaming and impossibly tall. The crowd let out a collective gasp of awe. It was undeniably a spectacular design. "The Legacy Tower will be more than just the tallest building in the Western Hemisphere," Dominic continued, his voice ringing with passion. "It will be a vertical city, a beacon of sustainable technology, a hub of global commerce, and the most exclusive address in the world. This is not just steel and glass. This is a statement. A statement about who we are and what we can achieve." He paused for effect, letting the weight of his words settle. "A project of this magnitude requires a team of unparalleled visionaries. And tonight I want to introduce you to 2 of them." He smiled, a dazzling flash of white teeth, and extended a hand towards the front row. "First, the woman whose impeccable taste and modern sensibility will grace every inch of our residential interiors. My brilliant partner in life and my inspiration, my fiancée, Tiffany Monroe." Tiffany, looking ecstatic, practically floated to the stage, blowing kisses to the crowd. She joined Dominic at the lectern, and he kissed her cheek for the cameras. "Oh, Dom, you're too much," she giggled into the microphone. "I'm just so thrilled to be a part of this incredible project. Curating the living spaces in the Legacy Tower is a dream come true. My vision is all about clean lines, ultimate luxury, and creating the perfect backdrop for a truly curated life." She spoke for a few more minutes, stringing together a series of buzzwords she'd likely learned from a design magazine. To Audrey, it was a word salad of pretentious nonsense. But the crowd, captivated by her beauty and Dominic's power, applauded warmly. After Tiffany returned to her seat, Dominic's expression turned serious again, his tone becoming grave and important. "But the heart of any great building, its very soul, comes from its architect. For months, my board and I conducted a global search. We reviewed submissions from every top firm on the planet. The standards were impossibly high. The design had to be iconic, innovative, and most importantly, profitable." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "We found that vision in a firm that has, in the last few years, exploded onto the scene. A firm that has become synonymous with groundbreaking, genius-level design. A firm so exclusive they don't advertise. They don't need to. Their work speaks for itself. He was savoring this moment, drawing out the suspense. Audrey could feel the anticipation in the room. This was the final piece of his triumph. By aligning himself with this mysterious, brilliant firm, he was cementing his own status as a kingmaker, a man with the foresight to discover and harness true genius. From across the room, his eyes found hers. He held her gaze for a split second, and in that look, she saw it all the smug satisfaction, the final crushing dismissal of her own long-dead dreams. This, his look said, is what real success looks like. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice resonating with power, "it is my profound honor to announce that the lead architect for the Davenport Legacy Tower is the celebrated and visionary firm." He paused, a triumphant smile spreading across his face, ready to deliver the final word. Dominic's mouth was open, the name of the architectural firm on the tip of his tongue, when a polite but firm voice cut through the silence. "Excuse me, Mr. Davenport." All heads turned. Walter Abernathy, the distinguished chairman of the foundation, was walking calmly onto the stage from the wings. He had a gentle smile on his face, but there was an undeniable authority in his bearing. Dominic froze his smile, faltering, replaced by a flicker of irritation at being interrupted at the zenith of his moment. "Walter," Dominic said, his voice tight. "What is it? Can't this wait?" "My apologies, Dominic." Mr. Abernathy said, his voice amplified by the microphone as he reached the lectern. He turned to the audience. "A slight change in the evening's program. Davenport is, as always, an impeccable showman. However, the principal architect of this project is a rather private person and prefers to let their work, not their name, be the focus. But tonight, they have graciously agreed to make an exception." A confused murmur rippled through the ballroom. Dominic's face was a thundercloud of confusion and barely concealed rage. He had lost control of his own announcement. This wasn't part of the script. Tiffany looked back and forth between Dominic and Mr. Abernathy, her perfect smile frozen in uncertainty. Mr. Abernathy continued, his calm voice cutting through the tension. "The selection process for the Legacy Tower was unique. It was conducted as a blind competition overseen by the entire Davenport Corporation Board and an independent panel of international architectural experts. All submissions were presented anonymously, identified only by a project number. This was done to ensure that the winning design was chosen on pure merit, free from any preconceived notions or industry politics." He paused, letting his words sink in. Audrey could see the dawning horror on Dominic's face as he began to understand the implications. He had likely assumed his preferred old boys network firm would win, or that he could influence the outcome. The blind competition had taken the power completely out of his hands. "The board was unanimous," Mr. Abernathy said, his eyes scanning the room. "The winning proposal project, number 7B, was not just innovative. It was a work of sheer genius. It was a design that perfectly balanced iconic aesthetics with groundbreaking sustainable technology, creating a blueprint for the future of urban living. It was, in a word, perfect." He turned his gaze slowly, deliberately, letting it pass over the rows of expectant faces. It swept past Dominic, past Tiffany, past all the titans of industry. And then it stopped. His eyes met Audrey's. From her place by the pillar, she saw the moment of recognition, the silent acknowledgement. A soft smile touched Mr. Abernathy's lips. "It is my distinct honor," he announced, his voice ringing with genuine pride, "to ask the visionary behind Project 7B, the principal architect of the Davenport Legacy Tower, to join us on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the founder of Phoenix Designs, Ms. A. Sterling. For a full 5 seconds there was absolute silence. The name A. Sterling was known, but the face was not. The crowd looked around confused, searching for the mysterious architect. Then Audrey moved. She stepped out from the shadows of the column, her emerald dress catching the light. Every head in the ballroom turned to follow her as she began to walk towards the stage. The sound of her heels on the polished marble floor was the only sound in the cavernous room, each click a hammer blow against the stunned silence. The whispers started as a ripple and grew into a tidal wave. "Is that Audrey Davenport, his ex-wife? I don't believe it." Dominic's face was a grotesque canvas of disbelief. His jaw was slack, the color draining from his cheeks. He looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Tiffany stared, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and horror. She looked at Audrey, then back at Dominic, as if hoping he would laugh and call it all an elaborate joke. But Dominic wasn't laughing. He was watching his entire world tilt on its axis. He was watching the ghost he thought he'd banished rise before him, not as a specter of the past, but as the architect of his future, his legacy. Audrey reached the steps to the stage and ascended them with a grace and confidence that captivated every person in the room. She didn't look at Dominic. She didn't look at Tiffany. She walked directly to Mr. Abernathy, who took her hand and shook it warmly. Then she turned and faced the audience. She stepped up to the lectern, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of shocked faces. Her gaze finally settled on Dominic. She saw the sweat on his brow, the panic in his eyes, the complete and utter unraveling of the king in his castle. She took a breath, and when she spoke, her voice was clear, strong, and utterly unwavering. "Thank you, Walter," she began. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Audrey Sterling, and it is my firm Phoenix Designs that will be building the Legacy Tower." The spotlight was hers. The ballroom, which seconds before had been held in a state of suspended animation, erupted into a maelstrom of sound. It wasn't applause, not yet. It was a chaotic symphony of sharp, collective gappas, frantic whispers that spread like wildfire from table to table, and the sudden predatory clicking of dozens of phone cameras. Reporters who had been lazily covering what they thought was a standard corporate gala were now scrambling their professional instincts, screaming that this was the story of the year. Dominic Davenport stood frozen on stage, a statue carved from pure humiliation, the spotlight feeling less like a warm glow and more like a harsh, interrogating beam. Beside him, Tiffany's doll-like features seemed to be melting under the heat of 1,000 stares, her mind utterly failing to compute a reality so violently different from the one she had so carefully curated online. Audrey, however, held the center of the storm with an almost preternatural calm. She didn't gloat or cast a triumphant look at her ex-husband. She simply and brilliantly claimed her moment by focusing on the work. "The design for the Legacy Tower is built on a simple principle," she said, her voice resonating with a passion that was instantly magnetic, cutting through the rising din. "That progress and nature do not have to be enemies. That a building can be a source of energy, not just a consumer of it." As she spoke, Dominic's mind was a whirlwind of denial and rage. This wasn't possible. She couldn't have done this. This was his project, his legacy. He searched the faces in the crowd, his allies, his investors. He saw Harold Blackwood, a ruthless private equity titan whose billion-dollar investment was contingent on the project's flawless execution. Blackwood wasn't looking at him with admiration anymore. He was looking at him with the cold, calculating eyes of a man re-evaluating a failing asset. He saw others men he played golf with, men whose fortunes were tied to his, turning to each other and whispering their expressions, a mixture of shock and undisguised glee at his downfall. "We will have integrated geothermal heating drawn from deep within the earth." Audrey continued, her voice gaining strength. "A grey water recycling system that will not only supply the building's non-potable needs, but will also feed the half-acre of vertical gardens cascading down the southern facade. The glass itself is photovoltaic, harvesting solar energy. This tower will not just sit on the grid, it will give back to it." She was speaking the language of the Eden Project, her old discarded dream, but now it was polished, perfected, and backed by undeniable expertise. It was no longer a romantic fantasy. It was a billion-dollar reality, and she was its undisputed commander. Her presentation was a masterclass, not just in architecture, but in subtly exposing Dominic's own shallow understanding. He had sold the tower as a monument to luxury. She was revealing it to be a testament to ingenuity. When she finished her brief but powerful presentation, the room finally broke. The cacophony of whispers transformed into a single, thunderous wave of applause. It was genuine explosive, and it was a standing ovation. They were clapping for her vision, for the sheer breathtaking drama of her triumph. Audrey gave a gracious nod to the audience, and then turned to leave the stage. Her path took her directly past Dominic. Their eyes met for the first time since the revelation. The confident, condescending smirk he had worn all night was gone, replaced by a toxic cocktail of raw fury. Profound shame, and something she never thought she'd see in him, utter bottomless fear. "How?" He hissed, his voice a raw, broken whisper that was barely audible over the applause. "Who helped you?" "This was a trick. You cheated." She paused, looking at him not with hatred, but with a kind of sad finality, as if observing a relic from a forgotten time. "No one helped me, Dominic. You just never bothered to look," she said softly, so only he could hear. "You were right about one thing all those years ago. You told me I didn't know how the real world worked, so I decided to learn. You were so busy building an empire of glass, you forgot to check the foundations. And it turns out the foundation was me." She left him there, stewing in the wreckage of his own making. As she descended the steps, she was immediately swarmed. People who had looked right through her an hour ago were now desperate for her attention. "Ms. Sterling, a moment. Incredible vision. My card. Please, we must speak." Walter Abernathy materialized at her side, acting as a gentle but firm shield, guiding her through the throng. She caught one last glimpse of the stage. Tiffany was frantically pulling at a stunned Dominic's arm, her face a mask of tear-streaked panic. "Do something!" She was hissing, her voice a sharp, ugly thing. "This is a disaster, Dominic. My brand, our brand." His kingdom was crumbling, and his queen was discovering that her throne was made of cardboard. Their perfect future had vanished in the space of 10 minutes. As Audrey moved toward the exit, Sebastian Cole, the tech billionaire who had given her her first real chance, intercepted her, a wide, appreciative grin on his face. "Sterling," he said, raising his glass to her. "I always knew you were a killer. I just never expected to see such a public execution." Audrey laughed, a real unburdened laugh that felt like a release. "It wasn't an execution, Sebastian. It was just a long overdue change in management." She walked out of the ballroom and into the grand lobby, leaving the chaos and the wreckage of Dominic's ego behind her. The flashbulbs that had ignored her upon her arrival were now a blinding, relentless assault. The reporters who didn't know her name were now shouting it like a prayer. "Miss Sterling over here." How does it feel? Is this revenge? She didn't feel vengeful or even victorious. She felt free. Her success wasn't about him. It had never truly been about him. It was about reclaiming the woman she was meant to be. He hadn't destroyed her dream. He had inadvertently given her the fire and the solitude to build a far grander one. The next morning, the fallout was catastrophic and immediate. Harold Blackwood publicly pulled his billion-dollar investment, citing a crisis of confidence in the project's leadership. The Davenport Corporation's stock plummeted. The headlines were brutal. The architect of vengeance. How Davenport's ex-wife quietly seized his legacy. From trophy wife to tower kingpin. They all got it slightly wrong. She hadn't seized his legacy. She had simply stepped forward to claim her own. Her phone rang incessantly, with offers from around the globe. Phoenix Designs was no longer just a rising star. It was a supernova. As for Dominic, his world imploded. The board he once ruled with an iron fist called an emergency meeting to discuss his removal as CEO. His social and business calendars for the next 6 months were wiped clean with cancellations. 2 days later, a statement was released by Tiffany Monroe's publicist, announcing that, by mutual agreement, their engagement was over. Dominic Davenport, the man who thought he was building a monument to himself, had instead laid the foundation for the triumph of the woman he had thrown away. The Legacy Tower would be built not as a symbol of his power, but as an eternal testament to her genius, her resilience, and her quiet, unshakable strength. She had stolen the spotlight not by chasing it, but by simply becoming the sun. Audrey's story is a powerful reminder that our greatest strength is often forged in the fires of our deepest heartbreaks. For years she lived in the shadow of a man who saw her brilliance not as a gift, but as a threat. He tried to dim her light, to shrink her dreams, and to convince her that she was nothing without him. But he failed to understand one crucial thing: you can't extinguish a fire that is meant to burn. Her comeback wasn't loud or vengeful. It was the result of 5 years of silent, dedicated work, of rebuilding her worth brick by brick. At that party, she didn't just reclaim her narrative. She proved that the most stunning spotlight is the one you build for yourself. What did you think of Audrey's incredible moment of triumph? Have you ever had to prove someone wrong who underestimated you? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. If you were inspired by this story, please hit the like button. Share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more tales of unbelievable revenge and powerful comebacks. Thank you for watching.